German intelligence reports arrived with a tone of disbelief. Allied forces are moving with unprecedented scale. 150,000 troops are set to land on Normandy beaches. The words stark on the page could barely capture the reality. The officers reading them leaned back, eyes wide, shaking their heads. Impossible, some whispered. Yet the photographs, the intercepted communications, and eyewitness accounts confirmed it. Every calculation, every prediction shattered by the sheer audacity of the plan. On the Channel waters, LCVPs bobbed like dark shadows against the mist. Men crouched, rifles ready, backpacks weighed down by gear and anticipation. The surf surged waves, lashing against hulls, soaking uniforms, chilling bodies. Each splash seemed to echo the collective heartbeat of the approaching invasion. And then the ramps dropped. Soldiers surged forward into the surf, moving with a rhythm that was both chaotic and coordinated. Fact and legend merged. Some said the men moved as if guided by an unseen hand. Smoke and fire clouded the distance. Naval artillery unseen until the very last moment ripped through the horizon. The roar of guns, the hiss of shells, the cries of men all combined into a scene of theater and terror. Japanese commanders thousands of miles away received fragmented reports, descriptions that seemed more myth than reality. The scale, the precision, the relentless pace. 150,000 troops landing simultaneously across multiple beaches, a force that seemed to materialize from the fog itself. Even in the records kept by Allied officers, there were entries that read like legend. One diary note. We saw them advance through the water, some stumbling, some falling, yet each continued. The sea itself seemed to part for them, carrying them toward destiny. Another report noted the timing. Every landing craft hitting the beaches within minutes of each other, men disembarking with a discipline that defied exhaustion. Such documentation blurred the line between meticulous planning and mythic inevitability. From the perspective of those on the ground, each moment was electric, each second pregnant with consequence. Rifles raised, eyes scanning boots, squelching through the sand and water. The soldiers felt both fear and purpose. Commanders barked orders, signals passed, yet the human element, courage, confusion, and instinct filled every frame. The ocean itself seemed to participate, waves carrying men forward, spray mingling with the smoke and sand. By the time the first troops breached the dunes, the impossible had already begun. The Axis forces could scarcely comprehend it. 150,000 men, disciplined, coordinated, and relentless, moving across the beaches through chaos and fire, achieving what no one had predicted. The shock reverberated from Normandy to the far reaches of enemy command, leaving disbelief, awe, and fear in its wake. And in the diaries, in the letters, in whispered accounts, the human element, the fact and the folklore merged. The soldiers, the water, the smoke, the landing craft, all became part of a single narrative. A story of audacity, coordination, and human endurance. A story that would be retold, analyzed, and remembered for decades. The night before the landing, the coast of Normandy was shrouded in mist and uncertainty. Moonlight glinted off the waves, painting the sea with streaks of silver, yet hiding the immensity of what was about to unfold. Thousands of landing craft lay in the harbor, engines idling softly, awaiting the command that would unleash the largest amphibious assault in history. Maps and charts were spread across tables in dimly lit rooms. Officers pointing tracing lines, calculating tides, currents, and the positions of coastal defenses. Every detail mattered. A single miscalculation could cost hundreds of lives. And yet the human element, the courage, the fear, the anticipation, was as critical as any map or instrument. The soldiers themselves were restless. Men from every corner of the United States, trained, drilled, and hardened by months of preparation. Each carried the weight of their own gear, their weapons, and the unspoken burden of knowing that the enemy awaited. Whispers circulated among the ranks, stories of previous landings, tales of courage and tragedy. Some spoke of ghostly visions in the fog of comrades lost in training accidents, who seemed to return in spirit to guide the men through the uncertainty of night. Fact and folklore intertwined. The soldiers joked nervously, laughed at shadows, and yet clutched their rifles a little tighter. Every heartbeat counted, every breath measured. Weather reports were scrutinized repeatedly. Tidal predictions, wind speed, visibility. The planners knew that timing was everything. A tide too low would expose obstacles. A tide too high would swamp the landing craft. Winds could throw shells off course, obscure visibility, and disrupt coordination. And in the early hours of June 6th, the fog hung heavy over the coast, a veil concealing both opportunity and danger. Some whispered that the weather itself seemed to conspire with the Allies, hiding their movements from enemy eyes. Others later speculated it was mere coincidence, yet the eerie calm of the misty morning lent the operation a mythic air. The scale of the forces assembled was staggering. 150,000 men prepared to storm the beaches, supported by thousands of ships, hundreds of aircraft, and countless logistical elements. Artillery barrages were timed to soften defenses. Paratroopers dropped behind enemy lines to sow confusion. Engineers and sappers would clear obstacles under fire, paving the way for the infantry. Every unit knew its role, rehearsed repeatedly. Yet the uncertainty of combat remained. The Axis defenders largely unaware of the full scale, until the first explosions would face a force beyond imagination. Across the channels of communication, coordination was meticulous. Naval officers signaled with flags and radios, pilots relayed position reports, and ground commanders synchronized movements with astonishing precision. Even a single delay could ripple across the entire chain of events. Yet the planners accounted for this. Contingencies were in place, backups, alternate routes, overlapping support. Every calculation designed to maximize success and minimize confusion. The ballet of war, rehearsed on charts and in simulations, was about to be enacted in reality. Amid the machinery of war, the human stories persisted. Letters from officers spoke of sleepless nights of anxiety, of moments when a single glance at the sea filled them with both hope and dread. A corporal recorded in his diary, "I've never seen so many men gathered for a single purpose. And yet, each face is a mirror of fear and determination. We are a river of steel and flesh, moving toward an unknown shore." These glimpses into the minds of soldiers and leaders highlight the psychological tension that intertwined with logistics and strategy. The terrain itself posed a challenge. Beaches varied, some lined with sand dunes, others with cliffs and hedgerows. Obstacles, mines, and defensive positions awaited every step. Engineers had studied every contour, memorized every approach. Maps annotated with enemy positions, past patrol reports, and aerial reconnaissance formed a mosaic of knowledge. Yet the ground was alive with uncertainty. Tides shifted, visibility changed with the fog. Even the best-laid plans could falter under the unpredictable forces of nature and human resistance. Even in the moments before the assault, stories emerged that blurred reality and myth. Sailors spoke of phantom lights on the horizon. Paratroopers reported figures moving silently in the fog. Perhaps exhaustion and nerves, perhaps the imagination filling gaps in perception. Yet, these stories persisted, forming a layer of folklore that became inseparable from the factual record. The operation was no longer just a military maneuver. It had begun to take on the aura of legend, a colossal gamble on human courage, coordination, and fate. By dawn, the final preparations were complete. The landing craft were loaded, the soldiers positioned, and the officers giving last instructions. The fog swirled, the sea roiled, and the horizon seemed to pulse with anticipation. Every element, from the youngest recruit to the most senior commander, was attuned to the rhythm of the assault. The calm before the storm was almost deafening. The world held its breath, and the invasion of Normandy was about to begin. The first waves of landing craft approached the beaches with mechanical precision. Hundreds of LCVPs cutting through the dawn mist, each carrying men trained for this exact moment. Fact records later confirmed the scale: over 150,000 Allied troops, thousands of vehicles, artillery pieces, and supplies were committed to the operation. From the meticulously drawn invasion maps to the coordinated timing of every ship and plane, every detail was calculated. Yet even in these calculations, human intuition played its part. Commanders relied on experience, on gut instincts, on the subtle understanding of how men would react under fire. The beaches themselves were a deadly landscape, mined, obstructed, and fortified with bunkers and barbed wire. Intelligence reports detailed the German defenses, but nothing could fully capture the chaos that awaited the soldiers. Aerial reconnaissance provided snapshots of pillboxes and artillery positions, while intercepted communications hinted at troop rotations. Every fact, every piece of evidence fed into the planning machine. The Allies had counted every possible variable, mapped every tide, every slope, every hedge. Yet when the men finally set foot in the surf, reality would unfold in unpredictable ways. Naval coordination was a marvel of logistics. Battleships and destroyers offshore provided covering fire, their guns calibrated to hit precise coordinates along the beaches. Fact records show over 600 vessels were involved, forming a protective crescent along the coast. Supply ships carried tanks, trucks, ammunition, and rations, each offloaded with timing that allowed the first infantry waves to move without delay. Folklore among sailors spoke of near miraculous timing, how each landing craft seemed to arrive on cue, as if guided by some unseen hand. These stories, half legend, half truth, became part of the mythology of D-Day. Air support was equally meticulous. Hundreds of bombers had dropped tons of ordnance across the German defensive positions, creating smoke craters and confusion. Fighter planes patrolled overhead, providing cover and intercepting any counterattacks. Operational reports indicate that coordination between naval gunfire bombers and infantry landing times was calculated to the minute. Yet amidst this precision, the human element remained crucial: pilots adjusting to changing weather, commanders signaling corrections, soldiers interpreting the effects in real time. The sheer number of troops involved was staggering. Divisions from multiple Allied nations, each with specialized roles. Paratroopers had been dropped behind enemy lines hours earlier to disrupt communications and fortifications. Engineers and sappers worked under fire to clear obstacles, lay bridges, and prepare landing zones. Fact records note that over 20,000 tons of supplies were moved in the first 24 hours alone. Yet folklore among soldiers recounted stories of ghost brigades that appeared from the fog, advancing as if guided by fate. The lines between meticulous record-keeping and mythic perception blurred in the chaos of landing. The soldiers' movements were choreographed to optimize speed and minimize casualties. Landing in successive waves, each unit had rehearsed their approach hundreds of times. Yet when the surf pounded against hulls and the first bullets rang out, the human instinct took over. Diaries and letters later recounted soldiers clutching rifles tighter, calling for comrades stumbling in the water, yet pressing forward. Fact and folklore merged the precise, calculated plan and the unpredictable courage of men moving together through chaos. Artillery barrages shaped the battlefield. Shore batteries, machine gun nests, and fortified positions were neutralized by naval and aerial bombardment. Reports confirm hundreds of German positions were destroyed or suppressed in the opening hours. Yet soldiers' accounts spoke of a surreal haze. The sound of gunfire mingling with explosions, the spray of water, the cries of men creating a moment that felt both unreal and immediate. Each wave of infantry was guided not only by maps and orders, but by improvisation and courage. Every detail mattered. The angle of the sun tides the sequence of waves, the timing of smoke screens, and the pacing of landings. Fact sheets meticulously documented each variable, but folklore emerged in the retelling how men seemed to move as one organism, how some landing craft touched the sand, as if predestined, how the fog appeared to shield them at just the right moment. These accounts, exaggerated or true, contributed to the narrative of Normandy as both a strategic triumph and a near miraculous feat. By midday, the scale of success became evident. Fact records show thousands of troops had secured the initial objectives. Vehicles were moving inland and supply lines were established. Yet the stories that circulated among soldiers were of a battlefield that seemed alive, the sea parting for them, the sand giving way under purpose-driven boots, the smoke curling in patterns that almost guided them. Axis forces could only watch in disbelief, their calculations confounded by the speed and coordination of the landing. The numbers tell one story, the human experience another. 150,000 troops, thousands of vehicles, hundreds of planes, and ships meticulously coordinated. Yet it was the bravery, improvisation, and sheer will of men that carried the operation through its first hours. Fact and folklore intertwined. The chronicles would record both the evidence and the myths, the meticulous data, and the almost supernatural perception of a flawless landing. Each soldier's heartbeat, each splash of water, each echoing gunshot became part of the narrative that would endure for decades. Amid the roar of artillery and the crashing of waves, the human stories began to emerge. Soldiers stumbling through the surf, mud, and water soaking their uniforms, faces etched with fear, determination, and disbelief. Diaries later revealed moments of quiet reflection in the chaos. One private wrote, "I could hear the shells screaming over my head. I could feel the weight of every man around me. And yet we moved forward as if the sea itself was guiding our steps." The factual account of troop movements, landing times, and casualty reports could never fully capture the visceral experience of each soldier in that moment. Whispers and tales circulated among the ranks. Some spoke of comrades appearing where they were not expected, a timely hand saving a soldier from drowning or an explosion. Others recounted shadowy figures moving through the fog, carrying wounded men to safety before vanishing. These stories, half legend, half remembered reality, became the folklore of the beaches. They were retold in letters home, in post-war memoirs, and in the hushed tones of veterans decades later. The line between fact and myth blurred as human memory grappled with the enormity of what had occurred. Families' letters provide another layer. A mother writing of her son's courage and her fears. A father recounting the pride and anxiety of sending men into battle. Fact layer records show exact unit deployments and casualty figures. Yet the emotional weight carried by each individual remains impossible to quantify. These human stories added texture to the statistics, giving life to the numbers. In the chaos, courage and fear intertwined, creating a mosaic of human experience against the backdrop of history. Even commanders were touched by human drama. Orders had to account for exhaustion, morale, and instinct, as well as tactics. One officer later recounted a moment when a young lieutenant, separated from his unit, led a small group through barbed wire and gunfire, inspiring others to follow. Such acts, while recorded in after-action reports, took on legendary proportions in storytelling among the troops. The heroism of individuals became intertwined with the narrative of the larger operation, forming myths that endured beyond the battle itself. The sea, the sky, and the land seemed to conspire in these human tales. Waves carried soldiers forward, smoke veiled their approach, and the fog provided both cover and disorientation. In these moments, soldiers reported seeing shapes in the mist, figures who moved with them, guiding them, warning them, or simply existing as the specters of anxiety and hope. Whether imagined or real, these stories spread quickly and became part of the collective memory. Fact layer chronicled movement and timing, while folklore layer preserved the eerie, almost supernatural texture of experience. There were small, intimate moments that contrasted the scale of the operation. A medic kneeling in the surf, attending to a wounded comrade, while shells fell around them. A soldier offering water to another, sharing rations, or carrying equipment for a friend. These details, captured in letters, memoirs, and oral histories, created a human heartbeat amid the massive orchestration of war. The enormity of the landing could never erase the individual acts of bravery, kindness, and ingenuity. The Axis perspective also fed into the lore. Japanese and German intelligence intercepted reports, some exaggerated or misinterpreted, describing men moving like a river of steel and flesh, advancing with inhuman coordination, overwhelming defenses at impossible speeds. These accounts, filtered through fear and disbelief, added a layer of legend to what was already a monumental factual achievement. The myth of Normandy's landing was thus born simultaneously on both sides of the ocean. By the afternoon, the human layer was visible everywhere. Letters, diaries, oral histories, and photographs captured fragments of experience: muddy boots, bloodied hands, faces etched with terror and determination. Yet every account carried the same rhythm: the movement forward, the pulse of fear and courage, the interplay of chance and calculation. Soldiers and sailors alike felt the strange convergence of destiny and duty. Each life, each action, each heartbeat contributing to a story greater than the sum of its parts. In the retelling, the lines between fact and folklore converged. The exact number of men who fell at each wave, the timing of every landing craft, the positions of artillery, all meticulously recorded, were inseparable from the human perception of the landing as almost miraculous. The mist, the spray, the smoke, and the synchronized advance created an image burned into memory. The soldiers, both living and ghostly in remembrance, moved forward together. Fact layer documented the mechanics, folklore layer preserved the awe. And together they gave the Normandy landing a heartbeat that would echo through generations. The machinery behind the invasion was as impressive as the men themselves. Every element of the operation, ships, planes, paratroopers, and infantry, was part of a meticulously coordinated system. Naval vessels moved in precise formation, their positions calculated to protect the landing craft while bombarding enemy defenses. Fact records indicate that over 600 ships were involved, including battleships, destroyers, and transport vessels, each with a specific role in timing and fire support. The sheer scale was unprecedented. Landing craft schedules were synchronized down to the minute. Engineers and crews had practiced loading and disembarking procedures repeatedly. Ramps dropped with exact timing, ensuring troops hit the surf in waves designed to minimize exposure and maximize momentum. Sailors and officers relayed instructions through a combination of radio signals, flags, and visual cues, each movement rehearsed yet adaptable to the chaos of combat. Even the currents and tides were factored into the timing, a dance of water and steel. Air support provided another layer of coordination. Hundreds of bombers and fighter aircraft targeted coastal defenses, suppressing enemy fire and clearing obstacles. Paratroopers had already been dropped inland hours earlier, disrupting communications, destroying bridges, and sowing confusion. The interplay of air, sea, and land forces created a network of interdependent systems. Every delayed action, every misfire, every unexpected obstacle had ripple effects. And yet the planners anticipated contingencies, each unit capable of improvising while remaining within the overall orchestration. The logistical component was staggering. Supply chains ensured that ammunition rations, medical supplies, and reinforcements were ready at the exact moment needed. Trucks and jeeps moved along makeshift roads. Engineers repaired obstacles, and naval transport ferried equipment and men to the shore. Fact layer documents note that thousands of tons of material were delivered in precise sequence. Yet folklore layer whispers of ghost trucks moving through fog to deliver aid where no one expected. The efficiency of the system, human and mechanical, seemed almost supernatural. Within the landing craft, human coordination mirrored the larger system. Officers signaled with hand gestures, Crewmen adjusted ramps in the surf, and soldiers positioned themselves for immediate movement once ashore. Diaries recount how, despite the noise, chaos, and fear, men seemed to move with an almost instinctive understanding of timing and spacing. The interplay of rehearsed procedure and human improvisation was critical. Every second mattered, every wave of troops a cog in the larger machine. The beaches themselves became a testing ground for systems integration. Obstacles had been mapped in advance, minefields, charted defensive positions located. Engineers cleared paths under fire, creating lanes for tanks, trucks, and infantry. Fact records meticulously note the sequence of cleared zones and subsequent troop movements. Folklore accounts speak of the sand itself seeming to give way, of ramps lowering at the perfect moment, of men appearing to flow as one organism toward their objectives. The combination of human effort, technology, and planning created a near mythical execution. Even the smallest innovations contributed to the efficiency of the system. Specialized ramps on LCVPs allowed faster disembarkation. Portable bridges enabled tanks to move over obstacles, and coded signals ensured units did not interfere with each other in the chaos. Planners and engineers constantly adapted, learning from each rehearsal and previous operation. The system was flexible, yet rigorous human skill amplified by mechanized precision. By mid-morning, the effectiveness of these systems became evident. Successive waves of troops reached their objectives. Vehicles and supplies moved inland, and lines of communication were established. Fact layer confirms that the invasion met its initial schedule remarkably well, with minimal disruption despite enemy fire. Folklore. Layer recounts stories of landing craft arriving, as if guided by fate, of medics appearing exactly where needed, of soldiers moving with an almost preternatural coordination. Together, these layers convey both the reality and the legend of D-Day. The orchestration of D-Day was more than logistics. It was an embodiment of human ingenuity, discipline, and courage. The success of the operation relied not only on numbers and machines, but on the ability of individuals to integrate into a larger system, responding to circumstances, improvising when necessary, yet maintaining harmony with the grand plan. Every man, every boat, every plane became a part of an immense living system that transformed strategy into action. And yet, even amidst this precision, chaos remained inevitable. Shells missed, soldiers stumbled, ramps jammed. The human layer intervened, quick thinking and bravery, correcting errors. Fact records capture the timings, the sequences, the successes, and failures. Folklore. Layer preserves the tales: the hero who lifted a fallen comrade under fire, the medic who appeared where no one expected, the sailor who navigated a broken ramp with uncanny skill. These stories gave the system a heartbeat, a human pulse amid the mechanized order. By the afternoon, the integration of sea, land, and air had proven decisive. The beaches were secured, supply lines operational, and the initial objectives achieved. The Axis defenders were confronted with a force whose scale, precision, and coordination seemed beyond comprehension. The system, both mechanical and human, had delivered its promise. Yet the human experience, the fear, the courage, the improvisation remained at the center, giving the operation its cinematic rhythm, its pulse, and its enduring legend. By the first light of dawn, the beaches erupted in a storm of movement and sound. Landing craft met the sand with a rhythm almost musical in its precision. Soldiers leaping into the surf, rifles raised, eyes scanning, feet sinking into the churned sand. Smoke from naval bombardments rose in columns, curling into the morning sky, mixing with the mist that clung to the coastline. Every wave of troops advanced as rehearsed, yet each step carried the weight of uncertainty and danger. The German defenses, arrayed in bunkers, machine gun nests, and artillery positions, opened fire. Tracer rounds cut arcs across the waves, explosions sending up geysers of sand and water. Yet the troops pressed on, each movement a combination of training instinct and sheer courage. Fact layer confirms units landed within minutes of schedule despite the hail of fire. Folklore layer whispers of soldiers appearing to move as if guided by some invisible hand, finding cover at the perfect moment, rescuing comrades without hesitation. The surreal blend of planning and human instinct created a scene that seemed both chaotic and orchestrated. Amid the surf, individual acts of heroism punctuated the massive operation. A corporal carried a wounded comrade through the pounding waves, pausing only when forced by exhaustion. A squad leader redirected his men under fire, leading them over a mined obstacle, while shells rained around them. The landing craft crews themselves performed miracles, guiding boats through currents, adjusting ramps at the last second, balancing soldiers and equipment to prevent capsizing. Every action, small or large, amplified the success of the system. Naval gunfire continued its deadly support. Destroyers and battleships targeted key positions, suppressing machine guns and artillery emplacements. The coordination between sea and land forces was executed flawlessly. Fact layer records note hundreds of bunkers neutralized in the opening hours, paths cleared for subsequent waves of infantry. Yet soldiers' accounts describe moments where it seemed the coastline itself aided them, the fog lifting to reveal safe lanes, the tide carrying them forward, smoke veiling their approach. Legend and fact intertwined seamlessly. Air support added another layer of intensity. Fighter planes strafed enemy positions, bombers released payloads with uncanny timing. Paratroopers disrupted communications inland, confusing defenders and cutting off reinforcements. The combination of sea, land, and air created a force multiplier, overwhelming defenses that had seemed insurmountable in reports. Yet the human element, decision-making under fire courage. Improvisation remained central. Every error corrected, every misstep covered by a comrade. The rhythm of the landing was sustained by both planning and human resilience. As waves of men pushed forward, obstacles fell away. Barbed wire and mines, cleared by engineers, sandbags overrun machine guns, silenced by coordinated fire. Fact layer confirms that successive units reached their initial objectives with remarkable speed. Folklore among soldiers described phantom guides who appeared to show the safest paths, medics arriving precisely when needed, and whispers of comrades appearing exactly where they were most critical. These accounts, exaggerated or true, contributed to the mythic aura of the landing. By mid-morning, the scale of the operation revealed itself fully. Thousands of soldiers' vehicles and supplies were ashore, advancing inland, consolidating positions. The German defenders were caught in a whirlwind they could neither fully understand nor counter. Communications faltered, morale wavered, and the perception of inevitability took hold. The operation's crescendo, the fusion of meticulous planning and human courage, had reached its zenith. The beaches, once a formidable defensive line, now bore the imprint of relentless coordination. Shells and smoke still rose, yet the momentum of the Allied forces was unstoppable. Soldiers continued to push forward, medics tended the wounded officers, directed movements, and engineers prepared the ground for follow-on forces. Fact and folklore merged the evidence of success. The myth of near supernatural timing, the human drama, all coalesced into a moment that would be remembered, studied, and retold. By late morning, the climax of D-Day was unmistakable. The landing had achieved what once seemed impossible. Fact layer documented the precision, the speed, the sheer numbers. Folklore layer preserved the awe-inspiring perception, the near-miraculous flow of men and machines. And together they created a narrative that was both historic and legendary, a culmination of preparation, courage, and human will. The beaches of Normandy would never again be seen as merely sand and tide. They had become a theater of human resilience and coordinated genius. As the smoke began to lift over the beaches of Normandy, the scale of what had been accomplished became visible. Thousands of soldiers now moved inland, securing the dunes, capturing strategic points, and establishing supply lines. Artillery had softened defenses, naval bombardments had cleared obstacles, and air support had neutralized critical positions. Fact Layer confirms that in the first hours alone, the initial objectives were met with remarkable efficiency. Yet beyond the numbers, the human experience told a different story. Exhaustion, adrenaline, fear, and courage mingled in every heartbeat. Medics and stretcher bearers moved tirelessly through the chaos. Wounded soldiers were lifted from the sand, and surf, treated on the spot, carried to safety. Diaries later recorded the grim reality of the beach mud, bloodwater and smoke blending into an almost surreal landscape. Soldiers who had faced near-certain death moments before now shared brief words of relief, checking on one another, helping comrades stand. The human pulse of the landing continued, even as the larger machinery of war pressed forward. Supply chains and logistics unfolded with precise timing. Trucks, jeeps, and tanks moved along cleared lanes carrying ammunition rations and reinforcements. Engineers repaired roads and bridges, ensuring that the momentum of the landing did not falter. Fact records show thousands of tons of material delivered on schedule, sustaining the advance. Yet folklore layer preserves the stories of seemingly miraculous deliveries, vehicles arriving just when needed, supplies appearing through smoke and fog, as if by fate. Soldiers would recount these moments later, attributing near supernatural timing to the system that carried them. The psychological impact on the defenders was profound. German and Japanese intelligence intercepted reports and photographs of the landing, conveying both the scale and precision of the assault. Disbelief and fear spread through command posts. Some officers reportedly believed the Allies had been aided by unseen forces, the coordination beyond what human calculation could achieve. The shock of 150,000 men landing, supported by thousands of vessels and aircraft, shattered expectations and forced rapid adjustments in defensive strategy. In the hours following the initial landings, the beaches transformed. From a line of defense, they became a hub of activity, a corridor for troops and supplies moving inland. Fact layer notes the speed of consolidation, the establishment of communication lines, and the securing of key objectives. Folklore layer recounts small human moments that seemed improbable. The medic appearing precisely when a soldier fell, a corporal rescuing men from a waterlogged landing craft, soldiers stepping over sandbags as if guided by instinct. These stories became part of the collective memory of the operation. Even as the day progressed, the integration of forces remained critical. Infantry, artillery, and engineers worked in concert, overcoming obstacles and adapting to unexpected resistance. Communication lines were tested, plans altered on the fly. Yet the human element, initiative, courage, and improvisation ensured the operation remained on course. Each soldier, each officer, each crew member contributed to a system that had proven both resilient and flexible. By evening, the outcome of the first day was undeniable. Thousands of men had reached their objectives, casualties, though significant, were managed, and the beachhead was established. The Axis defenders, facing an unexpected combination of scale coordination and human resilience, were forced to retreat or reorganize. The initial shock was giving way to a grudging recognition of the Allies' capability. The legacy of this landing would shape not only the remainder of the campaign, but the collective memory of the war. Letters and diaries recorded the aftermath from the perspective of the men themselves. Some wrote of the physical exhaustion of sand and blood caked on uniforms, of fear mixed with a strange exhilaration. Others noted moments of dark humor, small acts of kindness, and the camaraderie that had carried them through chaos. Fact layer documented movement and success. Folklore layer preserved the texture of lived experience, the human heartbeat of the operation, and the stories that would be passed down through generations. As night fell over Normandy, the beaches quieted for a brief moment. Fires still smoldered, waves lapped at the landing craft, and soldiers prepared for the next phase. The invasion had succeeded in its first objective. Yet the human drama continued. The pulse of courage, fear, determination, and improvisation remained. The system of war, The coordination of land, sea, and air had delivered its promise. But it was human will that had brought it to life, and the memory of that first day, etched into sand, water, and steel, would resonate through history. The beaches of Normandy fell silent. The smoke, the sand, the echoes of thousands of footsteps. All that remained was the imprint of courage. 150,000 men had landed, and the world would never be the same. Enemy commanders stared in disbelief. Numbers, precision, and human will had shattered expectations. A legend was born in the surf and the mist. Acts of bravery went unseen, of shaping history in silence. Yet their echoes linger. The tide carries their story forward, whispered through time. You have glimpsed D-Day's hidden chronicles. Subscribe, follow, and witness the untold courage, the unseen heroes. The echoes of Normandy will never fade.